Okay, so you've probably seen these headlines about these mysterious drones, right? I mean, they're all over the East Coast,
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy to see it all unfold.
from New Jersey all the way up to Massachusetts.
Yeah, and they're even showing up around military
It's
bases.
like something right out of the sci-fi movie, you know?
Right.
So we're going to do a deep dive today.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of news reports. We've got
Mm.
official statements and even some firsthand accounts from people who say they've seen these things.
It's
We're going
wild.
to try and I don't know, separate fact from fiction, see if
Yeah.
we can make any sense of this whole drone mystery.
Yeah, I think the thing that's so intriguing about this is it's not just a few isolated incidents.
Right.
We're seeing like a pattern
Yeah. That's what I find so unsettling.
of drone activity on a scale we haven't really seen before.
Let's start with just the basics. What do we actually know about these drones?
Yeah.
Where are they being spotted? What do they look like?
So, reports are coming in from all over New Jersey, New York City, Pennsylvania, Maryland, you name it,
Wow.
even as far north as Massachusetts.
Right.
And the descriptions are pretty consistent. I mean, we're not talking about your average, like run-of-the-mill drones here.
Yeah.
Some witnesses are describing these things as being the size of a car hood.
Car hood size.
Uh,
Okay, so that rules out some kid messing around with a toy, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is serious stuff.
I mean, what kind of capabilities would a drone that size even have?
That's a great question, and it's one that has a lot of people worried. I mean, a drone that large could be carrying some pretty serious equipment. You're talking high-powered cameras with zoom lenses that can see for miles, sophisticated sensors that can pick up all sorts of data,
Ooh, wow.
potentially even equipment for electronic warfare, jamming signals, that kind of thing.
That's scary.
And that's why these sightings are raising so many eyebrows, especially when you consider where some of these drones have been spotted.
You're talking about the sightings near military bases.
Exactly. We've had reports of these drones flying near sensitive military installations, which raises some serious concerns about security. What are they doing there? Who's controlling them?
It makes you wonder if the authorities, have some thoughts on that.
Right.
I mean, what are they saying about all this?
Well, the official response has been a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. On the one hand, you have governors from several states. They're calling for answers. They're demanding to know who's behind these drones, what they're up to.
Right.
But then on the other hand, you have the Pentagon downplaying the threat, claiming that these drones don't pose a risk to national security.
That's a pretty stark contrast. Why do you think they're being so dismissive?
It's a really interesting question, and honestly, one that has a lot of people scratching their heads. One possibility is that they simply don't know
They don't know.
who's behind these drones, and they're kind of reluctant to admit that they have a potential security gap. But another possibility, and this one's maybe a little more unsettling, is that they do know who's behind it.
okay.
But for whatever reason, they're choosing not to say anything.
Yeah, that's a little unnerving to think about.
It is.
What about the FBI? I mean, those guys are usually pretty quick to jump on anything that even remotely smells like a national security threat.
Absolutely. They are, and in fact, they have been investigating these drone sightings. They've even set up a tip line, for people to report any information they might have. But so far, they've been pretty tight-lipped about what they found.
So you've got the Pentagon saying nothing to see here.
Right.
You've got the FBI staying silent.
Yeah.
That's not exactly reassuring, is it? But what about the people who are actually seeing these drones? I mean, are their accounts shedding any light on this?
That's where things start to get really interesting, because we're not just talking about random sightings here. I mean, you have eyewitnesses describing formations of drones, some hovering silently, some moving in ways that just defy what conventional aircraft can do.
Formations.
Yeah.
That sounds organized, almost like they're being controlled by someone for a specific purpose.
Yeah. It definitely raises that possibility. And it's not just everyday citizens reporting these sightings. Even Senator Andy Kim, who represents New Jersey in Congress, he posted a video online of what he saw.
A senator is out there chasing drones. That's crazy.
It is kind of wild, right?
So what did he see? Did he mention anything about their size?
Well, he described seeing multiple lights in the sky, some steady, some flashing, moving in really erratic patterns. And yeah, he actually did mention size. He said he spoke to someone who saw one of these drones up close, and they described it as being, you guessed it, car hood size. He even said that, at first he thought some of the lights were planes, but when he looked closer, he's confident that what he saw were drones.
So even a senator is confirming these things are out there.
Hmm.
But if they're not from some foreign adversary, which is what the Pentagon's claiming, Then where are they coming from? I mean, are they being launched from somewhere within the U.S.?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, the fact that the Pentagon has specifically ruled out a foreign adversary only makes things more mysterious, you know? If
Hmm.
it's not a foreign power, then who does that leave?
It seems like the most likely explanation is that they're coming from somewhere inside the U.S., but that just raises even more questions. What group or organization would have the resources and the, I don't know, audacity to pull something like this off?
You're right to be asking those questions. And honestly, it's the lack of answers that's really fueling the speculation and the anxiety surrounding all of this.
I bet. A lot of people are probably wondering why the authorities aren't just shooting these things down. I mean, if they're posing a potential threat, why not just take them out?
Well, it's not quite that simple. First of all, you have to consider the safety of people on the ground. I mean,
Ah.
shooting down a drone, especially one of that size, over a populated area could result in debris falling and causing damage, even injuries.
Oh.
And then there are the legal implications. I mean, the use of force always needs to be justified, right? Simply seeing a drone in the sky isn't necessarily enough to warrant shooting it down.
So it's this weird game of cat and mouse, but with like much higher stakes.
Exactly.
They have to weigh the potential threat against the risks of actually taking action. But if these drones are being launched domestically, wouldn't that make them a clear threat? Wouldn't that justify a more aggressive response?
Logically, yes. But the official stance seems to be one of caution and, to be honest, a bit of confusion. The head of U.S. Northern Command, which is responsible for defending the continental U.S., he actually told Congress that they're seeing drones over military installations multiple times a week.
Wait, multiple times a week, so this isn't just some random occurrence. I mean, they're dealing with this on a regular basis. What are they doing about it?
That's not entirely clear. While they acknowledge that it's happening, they've been very vague about what specific steps they're taking.
That's more than a little concerning. We have these unidentified drones flying near sensitive military installations multiple times a week, and no one seems to know who's behind them or what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like stepping into uncharted territory here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And the lack of information, it just adds to the mystery and the unease. Makes you wonder if this is just the beginning.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack here, but before we go any further, let's take a step back and ask ourselves if there's any precedent for this. Has anything like this ever happened before?
Well, it's interesting. These drone sightings, they feel like something right out of, a science fiction movie.
Yeah,
But it's like happening right now in our airspace.
it is. Yeah.
It makes you wonder, if we're really prepared for this kind of thing.
You're absolutely right. This is reality, not some Hollywood thriller.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were just discussing, this isn't even the first time something like this has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that incident at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia back in December 2023? They had multiple drones, like just flying over the base for weeks.
Yeah, the Langley incident, it's really, really strange.
It's eerily similar to what we're seeing now,
It is.
and just as perplexing.
They never figured out, who was behind those drones either.
It makes you wonder if there's like a connection.
Right.
Is this a continuation of that same activity or something totally new?
It's a question investigators are no doubt exploring right now, but it definitely highlights the fact that this isn't just some, one-off event.
Right.
We're seeing a pattern
Yeah.
of unexplained drone activity.
And the frequency seems to be increasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've established this as a recurring thing,
Yeah,
and it's happening at a scale that's, raising some serious concerns.
absolutely.
But let's get to the heart of the mystery here. Who is behind these drones?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there are a lot of theories out there,
I bet.
some more, shall we say, imaginative than others.
Let's hear them. Walk us through the possibilities. What are we looking at here? What are like the most likely explanations?
Well, I mean, on the less sensational side of things,
Okay.
some experts suggest these could be, just hobbyist drones.
Okay.
People pushing the limits of their equipment, maybe not aware of the regulations or the airspace restrictions, or, maybe even just seeking attention.
Okay, but the scale of this, the formations,
Mm.
the sheer size of some of these drones,
Like-
it doesn't really fit the profile of, your average drone enthusiast, does it?
You're right to be skeptical. It's why another theory focuses on commercial operations.
Oh, okay.
Maybe these are companies testing new drone technology or, conducting some kind of unauthorized surveys.
It's an interesting angle. Companies are always pushing the envelope,
Oh, yeah.
especially when it comes to technology.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd think you'd be a little more careful about operating, near military bases.
Hmm. You would think so, and that's what makes this theory so puzzling. I mean, if it is some kind of legitimate commercial activity, why all the secrecy?
Right.
Why not just get the proper permits and operate in the open? It's almost as if they're intentionally trying to stay under the radar.
That's a strange way to conduct business, especially if you're dealing with sensitive technology.
Right.
Okay, so those are some of the more, grounded explanations.
Right.
But what about the more out there theories, the ones that are really keeping people up at night?
Well, there are a few possibilities that, while speculative, are worth considering, just given the strange nature of these events.
Sure.
One theory is that these drones could be part of some kind of organized crime activity.
What?
Think about it. Drones are ideal for smuggling, surveillance, potentially even, carrying out attacks.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
But what kind of criminal organization would have the resources and the audacity to operate, drones on this scale and in such sensitive airspace?
That's a really good question, and it's one that investigators are no doubt exploring. Another possibility, and this one is particularly unnerving, is that these drones could be the work of some domestic extremist group.
Wow, that's a scenario we really don't want to think about. But
Mm.
what would their objective be? Causing disruption? Spreading fear?
Possibly, or it could be a way to, test security measures, probe for weaknesses,
Okay.
maybe even gather intelligence on sensitive locations. I mean, remember, drones can be equipped with some pretty sophisticated cameras and sensors, making them ideal for surveillance.
It's starting to feel less like a mystery and more like, a potential threat.
Right.
And it makes that lack of information from the authorities even more troubling.
Yeah,
I mean, if you have any idea who's behind this, why aren't they being more transparent with the public?
that's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's fueling a lot of speculation, a lot of conspiracy theories.
Right.
But, let's be realistic.
Sure.
If it were a simple explanation, wouldn't they have figured it out by now? I mean, the fact that this has been dragging on for weeks with no clear answers, it suggests they're dealing with something that they don't fully understand.
So what can be done? I mean, are there ways to counter these drones to protect ourselves from whatever threat they might pose?
Fortunately, there are technologies and strategies being developed, to try and counter this unauthorized drone activity. But it's a really complex and evolving challenge.
Sure.
These aren't your, typical hobbyist drones.
Right.
They're likely much more sophisticated, possibly even autonomous, meaning they can operate without direct human control.
Okay, so we're not just talking about swatting these things out of the sky with a tennis racket.
No, no, not at all.
What kind of countermeasures are we talking about?
Well, there's a range of options.
Right.
Some of them low-tech, some high-tech.
Okay.
Some involve jamming signals to disrupt the drone's control.
Okay.
Others involve deploying nets or even interceptor drones to try and physically capture them.
Wow.
Some agencies are even training birds of prey to take down drones.
Wait, birds of prey? Really? That's both fascinating and kind of terrifying. But I mean, are those methods even effective against a determined adversary,
Right.
especially one with the resources to deploy, these advanced drones?
Yeah, that's the big question. And the answer, unfortunately, is that it depends.
Oh, okay.
The effectiveness of any countermeasure depends on the sophistication of the drone itself and the skill of the operator.
I see.
It's an ongoing arms race, really, between those who want to use drones for good and those who want to exploit them.
It sounds like we're entering a whole new era of aerial security. One where the threats are more, I don't know, subtle and harder to detect. This whole situation is like a real wake-up call.
It is. It's forcing us to rethink how we protect ourselves, not just from traditional threats like aircraft, but from these smaller, more agile, and increasingly sophisticated unmanned systems.
It's like we're at a crossroads here. Drones have this incredible potential for good, but they also pose, some significant risks. And it's up to us to figure out how to navigate this new reality.
You're absolutely right. And a big part of that is figuring out how to regulate this technology effectively. We need to create a framework that allows for innovation and beneficial use while also addressing the potential threats to security and privacy.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential threats. We've talked about the countermeasures. We've talked about the need for regulation. But there's still this big question hanging in the air. Who's behind these drones? Are we any closer to finding out?
That's
We've been trying to unpack this mystery of these East Coast drone sightings. But frankly, the more we dig, the more questions we seem to uncover.
it's true.
But beyond the who and the why of these drones,
Right.
there's a whole other layer to this that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
The ethical and legal dilemmas they present.
You're absolutely right. I mean, drones are really pushing us to re-examine some pretty fundamental concepts
Hmm.
that we've, long taken for granted.
Right.
Things like airspace, privacy, even the definition of what constitutes a threat,
Right.
These are all ideas that were kind of shaped by our experience with traditional aircraft.
Sure.
But drones are blurring the lines,
They are.
and it's forcing us to adapt our thinking.
Okay, so let's break down some of these ethical quandaries. Where
Yeah.
do we even begin?
Well, let's start with the issue of privacy.
Okay.
Drones can be equipped with incredibly powerful cameras, sensors, all sorts of things,
Right.
capable of gathering huge amounts of data about people, their movements, all that.
Yeah.
And this raises serious questions about, surveillance, data collection, the potential for abuse, all of that.
It's a concern a lot of people share.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a drone hovering outside your window,
Yeah.
silently recording your every move.
Right.
It's like something straight out of a, dystopian novel.
It is.
Do we have any laws in place to protect us from that kind of thing?
Well, the legal landscape is still catching up, to be honest, to the
Okay.
reality of drone technology. I mean,
Sure.
we have laws related to trespassing and, voyeurism. But drones, they operate in a way that makes those laws really difficult to apply.
Right.
They can fly at altitudes and angles that make it really hard to determine intent. And the technology is evolving so rapidly that, it's hard for lawmakers to keep up.
So it's kind of like a legal gray area right now. People are worried about their privacy, but it's not clear what protections they have.
Yeah, that's exactly the challenge we're facing.
Okay.
And it really highlights the need for some clear regulations
Yeah.
that specifically address drone surveillance,
Sure.
We need to define what constitutes a violation of privacy, in this context,
Right.
and establish clear guidelines for how data collected by drones can be used.
So we're talking about things like restrictions on where they can fly,
Correct.
what kind of data they can collect, how long that data can be stored.
Exactly. We also need to make sure there's transparency and accountability
Yeah.
when it comes to, government agencies and law enforcement using drones. I mean,
Right.
it's a powerful tool, right? It can be used for good.
Sure.
Think about search and rescue operations or environmental monitoring.
Right.
But it can also be pretty easily abused for mass surveillance, even targeted harassment, that kind of thing.
That's like the double-edged sword of technology, right?
Yeah.
It can be a force for good, but it can also be used in ways that are, deeply troubling. And with drones, those concerns are kind of magnified because they're relatively inexpensive, easy to operate, and they can go places that we can't.
You've hit on a really crucial point.
Yeah.
The accessibility of drone technology, it's both a blessing and a curse,
Right.
It kind of democratizes access to these aerial capabilities, but it also makes it that much harder to control and regulate.
And it raises the stakes considerably, I think, when you start talking about weaponized drones. We've already seen the controversy surrounding, the use of armed drones in warfare.
Right.
And now those same ethical dilemmas are coming home to roost
Yeah.
with domestic law enforcement agencies, starting to explore the use of armed drones.
You're right. This raises a whole host of ethical and legal questions. Yeah.
That we as a society really need to grapple with.
Right.
I mean, are we comfortable with the idea of police using drones to apprehend suspects or control crowds?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the rules of engagement?
Right.
How do we ensure accountability? How do we prevent misuse?
These are tough questions with no easy answers, and they really highlight the fact that we can't just let, technology dictate the terms of our future.
Right.
We need to have a public conversation about the implications of this technology
Mm.
and establish ethical and legal frameworks that, protect our values and our freedoms.
I completely agree. We need to have a thoughtful, informed debate
Yeah.
about how we want to integrate this technology into our society,
Yeah.
what limits we want to place on its use, and
Right.
how we can ensure that it's used, responsibly and ethically.
It's clear that we're just, scratching the surface of this conversation.
Yeah.
But are there any countries or organizations out there that are doing this well, that we can learn from? There are some interesting examples emerging around the world.
Oh, okay.
Some countries are experimenting with, comprehensive drone registration systems
Okay.
that require operators to be licensed
Right.
and accountable for their actions.
Yeah.
Others are establishing designated drone zones,
Okay.
kind of like aerial parks,
Right.
where enthusiasts can fly their drones safely and legally without posing a risk to public safety or privacy.
Those are interesting ideas. It sounds like the focus is kind of shifting from simply trying to ban drones to like figuring out ways to manage their use effectively.
That's a good way to put it. It's about recognizing that, drones are here to stay
Yeah.
and finding ways to, harness their potential
Yeah.
while also mitigating the risks.
Sure.
And that requires a collaborative approach,
Right.
involving governments, industry, the public, all of us.
It's a complex issue, but it's one that we just can't afford to ignore.
Absolutely not.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into this drone mystery, it's clear that we're left with, more questions than answers.
It's true.
We may never know for sure who's behind all of these drone sightings, but maybe the more important takeaway is that this is a sign of things to come.
Yeah.
Drones are becoming more sophisticated,
Absolutely.
more ubiquitous.
Right.
And this is just a glimpse, I think, into the challenges and the opportunities that they present.
You've summed it up perfectly. This isn't just about some mysterious drones.
Yeah,
It's about how we as a society adapt to a rapidly changing technological landscape
right.
and ensure that these new technologies, they serve humanity,
Yeah.
not the other way
It's
around.
a conversation that's only just beginning.
Right.
So keep those eyes on the sky.
Yeah.
Keep those minds engaged.
Absolutely.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the mysteries of our world.